Banerjee, and I head Stanford Changelabs, where we look at advancing new innovation models for very large-scale and complex challenges. And we also look at new types of leadership. Today, I'd like to speak about this thing we call Leadership 3.0, and we also call it transformational leadership. Before I launch into Leadership 3.0, I'd like to take a few steps back and talk about a larger backdrop that we find ourselves in as a civilization, especially when we are looking at a little bit longer term horizon. And that would serve as a backdrop in thinking about what are the new kinds of leadership that we need. So first and foremost, we found that our global economies are much more fragile, and they are subjected to very, very stochastic changes based on events that can happen in anywhere in the world because of the degree to which it's connected globally. The fact that given the potential rise in consumption rates with a lot more people coming into the middle class, as well as a certainty of a few more billion people getting added to our already overpopulated planet, there's a great uncertainty about how we are going to be secure in energy and water and food, which are the lifebloods of civilization. What we found is that when there's uncertainty and when there's scarcity, it drives inequities, and we already are in a connected world with very, very deep and sharp inequities in different parts of the world. Meanwhile, we are also seeing a whole lot of political instability and geopolitical shifts, which have a bearing on what it is to be makes sense to do in the future. And what we are also finding is that the markets themselves can shift very rapidly, and for any organization or institution, you have new players that can come that you didn't see coming and contest you on your turf that you established over very long periods of time, or technology can come and create a new regime, but these things can happen faster than your traditional reaction time. So there's a great deal of need for agility. And the other thing that's happening is that the fact that these big changes are happening in the world is changing sensibilities of not just the consumers of your offerings, whether you're a university or a business. There are people who are using your services, but the sensibilities of the people who you're serving are changing, but also the sensibilities of the people who are joining your own ranks as employees is changing, and that's changing the nature of what you need to do. And then we have some really, really large and inescapable challenges, such as the climate change issue, which threatens our entire civilization. And there's so much evidence that the climate is changing much, much faster than we even feared. And this is going to bring a whole lot of change, and things that we thought were in, that other generations would have to worry about is already something we are facing right now. And of course, we mustn't forget that our civilization is kept alive by a very, very delicate system that has taken eons to come to a certain dynamic stability, equilibrium. And this system is coming apart at the seams, especially when it comes to the biosphere. We are in the midst of an environmental crisis that we haven't seen since the dinosaurs went extinct. And if you speak to the experts who study this, they say that we do not know how bad it is, but we know that it's much worse than we thought, right? And if you think about it, it took us from the beginning of time to about the 1820s or so to get to the first billion, and we are going to add another 2 billion, twice of that, in the next 30 years. So that is a rate of consumption and also dependence on already limited resources that we haven't ever seen before. So those raise some very, very large questions. So I think that we can't have any confidence that we are not entering an era marked by great turbulence. I think that we should consider that what is coming is a whole lot of change, a whole lot of turbulence, and a whole lot of new questions. And these questions are marked by scale, complexity, and urgency. But if you look at our traditional ways of meeting these challenges, we do not, our traditional decision-making systems and innovation systems are not geared for this, and which is partially why we've arrived at this juncture. So I would like to pose what I like to call a fishhook question. A fishhook question is a question that has a certain kind of inescapability about it, which has a way of lodging into your mind and not letting go and spawning more questions. And the big question that I would like to ask is, how do we collaborate with the future rather than antagonize the future? Because everything that we've done so far, if we think of what our state is in the future, everything that we've done is very questionable in terms of creating secure futures. So we've worked on the short term at the cost of the long term. And the question is, can we now look at the short term such that it's aligned with some long-term issues, because the scale and the urgency and the critical aspect of these issues are ones that we cannot escape. Now, what I would like to say, and this is a view that's shared by a fair number of people in the innovation community, is that we have gone, even in our lifetimes, we've gone through 3 different eras of and different kinds of economies, and though each of those have a certain kind of thinking associated with that, so we went through an economy and a thinking and a leadership style that had to do with how do we get people to consume more, how do we deliver goods that they can consume, improve lives, etc. And how do we operationalize this? Now, when we got good at that, that's something that we began to take for granted, and then we say, okay, how can we create experiences that are meaningful, and how can we create products and services that are gratifying, that are seamless, that get at what people are desiring at an underlying level. And now I would say that we are in an experience economy, and which is one of the reasons a company like Apple, that is so good at coming up with compelling products and services, has a market cap which is so high, and it's sometimes it crosses that of ExxonMobil. Now, what we would like to propose, me and our community of innovation experts, is that we are entering a transformation economy, whether we like it or not, because of the complexity of the backdrop and the forces at play. No matter what we are doing, we are actually now looking at solving other problems and having to deal with the problems of a different level of complexity and a different level of scale. And so what we would like to propose is that there is a need for a very different type of leadership, very different from the one that we've had, and we need to figure it out very, very quickly. So what we are finding is that there is already a new kind of leadership that is emerging, which is that stark contrast with what we had of the previous types of leadership. So the previous type of leadership, if you think about it, are the hierarchical ones with central control, where a whole lot of the thinking is done in a centralized area, and people below that level are increasingly disempowered to make change, and they're essentially implementing things that come down from the top. This is a model that got formed by the nation state and further got entrenched and solidified during the Industrial Revolution and the colonization era. But we still think like that. Our organizations, especially the legacy ones, are structured in that way. But what we're finding is that innovation is a new type of leadership, and it is creating a capacity to create new markets, create new change models of behavior, and create value in completely new ways. But another very important thing that we are finding is that leadership is not something that is embodied in the person as a role that they have achieved in life and then they are a leader, but it's a modality. Anyone it could be exhibiting the attributes of leadership, and it could be someone who is 19 years old who is showing attributes of a leadership, this new kind of leader. And so if we look at what leadership is coming to mean, it is the ability to inspire people. It's the ability to envision alternate futures and then driving transformations towards them. It is about framing intentionality and success in completely new ways. It's the ability to catalyze and leverage resources in completely new ways. It is the ability to implement in completely new ways. It's the decision making and judgment that is along new ways and looks at other dimensions and long-term futures, etc. And essentially, it is to disrupt the current system. I don't like the word disrupt, so I use the word interrupt because it's a more positive thing. But essentially, you're taking apart current systems and replacing them with future systems. And so this is a completely different view of what leadership is. But leadership needs to be tied to the type of challenge that you're working on, because if you are a leader of an operational group doing an operational thing, then you need to be an operational leader. So we also look at a taxonomy of different types of challenge types. And so there are certain things that might be difficult, but it's a bounded challenge. So if you are working on a new kind of, let's say, a new kind of low flow water pump, it is a bounded challenge. It's a difficult challenge, but it can be done. But if you are looking at how do you get people to adopt that pump, and how do you get them to use them in the right kind of way, that's a more open-ended challenge. And that's where you're looking at behavior, you're looking at adoption rates, you're looking at diffusion, and it's no longer the mechanical properties of the pump. But then if you're saying that you're really working on the issue of water security, and you want to get people to have at least the security of 100 liters of water per family per day, and you want to do it region-wide in a place that it has a real problem of water security, that is a very different class of challenges, and that we call the transformation challenges. Now, what we believe is that you need different forms of leadership. So you need a certain leadership 1.0 is where you know how to execute something that is fairly bounded, very well known, but you still need the leadership to execute it. But supposing you already had that, and that is a currency that you could bet on, then it opens up other doors to excel in other forms, and that's why you get people who are now looking at how do you create new experiences, and how do you create value and meaning in people's lives in new ways, which is not just about consumption of the goods, and which is also one of the reasons why you see a whole lot of value being built in companies that are not about consuming physical things and so on. So the Facebooks of the world. And the new type of leadership that we're talking about is something we call leadership 3.0, and that is about the ability to drive large-scale, deep, and profound transformation. And that's a different game. Now, so a transformation leader, their role is to transform systems, to get completely new outcomes, completely new trajectories for the future. And one of the key things that they are now responsible for, because there's such a need for extreme innovation, is to raise the innovation capacity of the system. It's not just to come up with a product or a service. Yes, they'll do that too. But at a larger level, they need to increase the innovation capacity. And the way we define innovation capacity is that this is a graph where on the y-axis you have what is the level of expertise in anything that you have. And on the y-axis, it is the class of challenge. As you go from more bounded problems and more simple, kind of more predictable and known challenges to more unknown, complex, multidimensional challenges that have the intersection of many systems, the infrastructure system, the technology system, the business systems, the behavioral systems, the governance systems, they're all interplaying. That's a much more complex playing field. So how do we get people to go from playing a provincial game to a much more, systems change game, because that's how innovation is moving. But as they're doing that, how do we build the expertise? So you might have someone who starts off here, but the question for a transformation leader is how can you get them to play this other game at a higher level of expertise? But it's not just one person you're looking at. You're looking, as a transformation leader, you're in charge of the portfolio of innovation and the capacity of innovation that the entire ecosystem has that might go beyond the walls of your own organization. You have a role in transforming the larger system and its ability to make transformation. So you're looking at the larger system, and in a sense, that's one of the things that you're trying to change. So this has deep implications on how you structure your organizations, how you put people on growth paths. Definitely has very deep implications on how we set up our educational systems and so on. But it's a very important concept and a very important building block towards creating transformation capacity. So ultimately, what we want to be able to do is to create a new capacity. It's a new capacity in our leaders and our innovators, not just to come up with clever forms with the current generation systems, but to create next generation systems. And I love this term that is from Oliver Wendell Holmes, is we are seeking simplicity. But now we are not just seeking simplicity on this side of complexity, but on the far side of complexity. So this is what constitutes transformation leadership, and their role is to maximize innovation capacity.